And today's broadcast is brought to you by Eclectic Horseman Magazine. Stay tuned for Eclectic Conversations hosted by Emily Gitchie.
I'm here today with Barney Nelson, and I'm super excited to visit about these incredible articles that we've been reprinting from her history, her long history of writing for magazines. And thanks, Barney, for joining me today.
You're very welcome.
Awesome. Good. Well, I think we need to start. Well, I'm trying to decide where we need to start. I would like to visit about when I very first met you. I had never heard of your writing before, and out of the blue, I got an article or an inquiry about an article that you were working on with Ronnie about responding to an article that Kathleen had wrote in the magazine. And I'd never had somebody send me an article in response to an article. And tell me a little bit about like what motivated you guys to send that in.
If I remember right, I mean, I should have done some homework here probably, but Ronnie Scott subscribed to your magazine, and he's one of my oldest and dearest friends, and we've both been to a lot of ray hunt clinics, and so periodically we talk about all that stuff. And so anyway, had read an article in your magazine, and he sent me a copy of it and told me that I ought to I think he actually subscribed to your magazine.
Yeah. Oh,
and, yeah. And so I just got interested, and I think I read something, or we did, the article that he was impressed with that he wanted me to read. I guess we talked about it, and so I sent you an email about it, I guess, and said that I really enjoyed it, and it was one of the first things I'd read that kind of got things right with the ray hunt stuff, because I think so many people don't understand. I think basically, because I was a teacher, and so to me, basically what he and Tom both were trying to do was not teach you how to do things, not say, okay, pick up on this rein 2 inches and turn it 4 inches this way and you'll get this response. But what they were trying to get across to you was how to communicate with your horse, and how to listen to your horse, and how to have your horse listen to you. And too many of the clinicians, to me, are still stuck in the here's how to do it phase. And so whatever that article was, I can't even remember now, it seemed to get that about it, and understand that it's not a how-to situation. They're not trying to give you lessons or teach. They're trying to help you figure out how to teach yourself by using your horse. And so it just, I guess, went from there. I think you and I started talking, and then I said, well, I had written about 11 articles about Ray whenever I first knew about him, and that seemed to be about the time he was getting started too. And I didn't try to write about him. I tried to write about him the way he impressed me, which was this same kind of idea. And so instead of trying to tell everybody exactly what he was doing, I just tried to tease them into going to his clinics. Yeah. And so I think maybe I helped him spread the word around, because I think people would read about him. They wouldn't remember who it was that read the article, but I've heard a lot of people say to me, and not knowing that it was my article, that they'd read something in Western Horseman a few years ago that made them come to the clinic.
Mm-hmm.
And I would just kind of smile and nod and say, yeah, me too.
Well, that I remember when you like told me that you had these articles and would I be interested in reprinting them? It was like Christmas. I mean, I was so exciting for me to have the opportunity to share this with the readers because this is a period of time. I mean, it's before, like, I didn't go to my first ray hunt clinic till probably like 89, 90. So it was so neat to get to have a pick. And I was a teenager, so I didn't really know what I was seeing. But to have this, it was like the prequel, the what came before when I jumped in my learning. And it was just like this trove of great information. It was so exciting.
Yeah, it was fun for me too, because, you know, as an old lady that kind of is a has-been or a never was, however you want to look at that, it was fun to relive all that again and to see the reaction from people to reread it again, you know, because I think once again, they probably don't remember who wrote anything, which is great. That's what a journalist is supposed to do. You know, nobody's supposed to know who you are. You're in the background. You're the little mouse in the corner. So it was fun to relive it and get to think about all of it again, and then notice things that now I would say different. I don't know whether I said it right the first time or whether my ideas have changed. I about 1990 or so, I got more into being a college teacher, but I felt like I owed it all to what I had learned with Ray and Tom, and through horses, you know, because even though students can talk, and they can usually talk English, they very seldom will tell you the truth about what they're thinking. So you sort of have to, or they don't even know what they're thinking, you know. So you sort of have to do the same thing you did with horses: is how can I communicate and
Yeah. Oh,
figure
that's
out what really is going on here. So all of that stuff just really helped me. So I think I was a really pretty good teacher, and at least my students, whenever I run into one somewhere, they tell me I was. So I don't know.
That's awesome. That's awesome to think about that translating into your work with students. That's so cool. Talk a little bit, and I'm trying to think of, I want you to elaborate. Do you remember like specific incidents where that was super clear, where you had a student who maybe wasn't communicating what was really going on, and you were able to feel what was going on because of the horse work? Or just in general?
Yeah, maybe the most vivid thing I can think of, roll just off the top of my head. I was tutoring before I got a full-time job as a college professor. I was working on my master's degree, and I was tutoring in the tutor lab, trying to help kids learn to write. And so I was able to work with them one-on-one that way. And it was a place where I could really kind of get into trying to apply the the Ray Hunt method, or whatever you want to call it, philosophy. I call it a philosophy. And I had a student come in that was a black student, and he was dressed in a 3-piece white suit, and he had pink square tinted glasses on. So he was obviously not poor. And he came into the tutoring lab at Sul Ross State University in Alpine, Texas, where I was a student and a graduate student, and where I eventually worked. He said his teachers all told him he couldn't write. And he was kind of at the end of his rope. And I figured he probably was, because why would a guy like that come to Sul Ross? Most of my students were ESL, English as a second language, border kids or rural kids or poorer class kids. And this was obviously a wealthy city boy. And so why he came to Sul Ross, I don't know, except searching, for something. So I asked him if I could see one of his papers, and he gave it to me. And it was just gobbledygook, and I couldn't, it was words, but I couldn't really make sense. And so I said, would you read that to me? And when he read it, it made perfect sense. So I looked at it again, and it was that he didn't know punctuation at all. Mm-hmm. So he didn't have periods or commas that would help me. And so today I'd probably get in trouble for asking that, because it would be sort of a racial thing. But I said, can you rap? And he said, yes. And I said, well, think about your writing as if you're rapping. And so whenever you hear that softer beat, put in a comma. And whenever you hear that harder beat, put in a period. And I said that the punctuation was the music of language that helps me hear your music. And he did that, handed me the paper, and it was like magic. I mean, it wasn't perfect by any means, but he got it right away. And he was able to at least make it so I could actually read his paper, and so then maybe we had a place to start where he could work on a few of the other punctuation rules. And I think part of it was resistance. And once he figured out that punctuation and music were connected, then he also wasn't nearly as resistant. So to me, that was pure what I had learned, or what I think I had learned.
Yeah.
Because I got to his feet, I started where he was at, and I helped him trust me. But I never saw him again. So I don't know whatever really happened to him, but that was a really neat experience teaching.
Yeah. Wow, that gave me chills. Yeah, he got what he needed, and then he could go on with it. But yeah. I mean, like, it is sort of, as you're telling me that story, it does feel like that moment of, that when we're working with a horse and the horse turns loose, and that it's understood, yeah. Like, it's just that it's indescribable.
Yeah. And that's what makes teaching so much fun. If you're getting that from your students. If you're not, then teaching is nothing but frustrating. But if you can ever get that to start coming through. So, the whole way that I tried to teach was to set things up so that students could get it, and that was hard. And I think Ray and Tom struggled with that. How can I set it up so that they get it? And I'm not just telling them what to do. I'm not just walking them through it. So I think they also, it wasn't, I didn't magically have that reaction from every student. That's why that one sticks out in my mind. But when it does happen, it's like magic, and it's addictive. You want to keep doing this. If it never happens again, you want to.
Yeah. Well, take us back to the very beginning, when you first saw Ray teach and you were seeing that approach for the first time. Like, when did the magic happen for you?
It just seemed like almost from the first time he opened his mouth. Because just something as simple as, he used to say, my damn horse won't lead. I've tried leading him with a tractor and he still won't lead. And then he would show us, how soft his horse was to lead. And it was like, oh my gosh, I've done the same thing. I've tried to jerk and jab and pull on my horses when they don't want to leave. I've got a great picture of that I took of some cowboys loading a horse that was pretty stubborn into a trailer, and they had the rope through the front of the trailer pulling on it, and then two guys with their arm locked were behind him pushing him up into that trailer. And I thought, it's no wonder those horses didn't want to leave, didn't want to get in that trailer. They were fighting for their life. So it was just like the clouds opened and sunshine came through almost. It was, I mean, I think you feel that way when you first see them, but then when you go home, which is the other side of the coin, you try to do it yourself. It's like, oh my God.
Yeah.
And Ray says you can see that there's a light at the end of the tunnel, but it's a really long tunnel.
Yeah. And it's a long journey that we might not ever. I mean, that's the part that's always fascinates me is we have this realization of what's possible. It's like you see what's possible when you see somebody like Ray work with a horse, and you have this vision that you keep working towards, knowing that you might not ever get there, but there's still in some people this desire to keep working, and that fascinates me endlessly. Why do we keep working for it?
Yeah, and that's the same key that is to teaching. I can't teach my kids how to write, but I can teach them to want to write, or to think that it's possible, or to enjoy those little moments. Because as a journalist and a writer, I'm sure you have those moments when you know that you said something in a really good way and it feels really good. And nobody told you to do that. You got it. It was your own little brain that figured this out. And that's what I think a lot of things that are wrong with education today is we're taking that away from them. We're making it too easy. We're saying, okay, put this foot in front of it. Like Ray used to say, here's a picture of an Indian with a headdress, color this little feather red and this little feather blue and this little feather green, and so what do the kids get out of that? Nothing. It's just school is drudgery, boring, and the only time it gets exciting is when you can figure something out on your own. And then if you ever taste that, it's sort of, or to me, of course, I'm probably strange since I never did quit, but you want to keep going with your education or not education. I mean, I think there's a lot of different things we ought to call education, because you can do the same thing if you're a spur maker and you never even graduated from high school, but, or a horseman that, didn't ever go to any school. So there's a lot of ways to educate yourself. And if you ever get that taste of success and confidence that you can figure something out, you just keep wanting to do that. And I think that's why the horses' attitudes get so good. If they can feel like they figured you out,
yeah,
they're happier and have more confidence and like you better.
Yeah. Well, and that makes me think too, like, as you're talking there, I'm thinking about, I can't remember who was visiting about it, but like when you're first teaching a horse to pull with a rope and really moderating how much, how you managing your dallies so that they feel like they can always pull the weight and not be overwhelmed. And so they're constantly building on that feeling of success. So they feel like they can accomplish what you're asking. And I see that in, with Sydney being a super, like a student who's really like trying to learn stuff all the time. And her friends are very achievement oriented, but sometimes they take on too much. And you're like, you're going to find that like you can't pull that weight and you want to not get them so so it's interesting to think about on both ends of the spectrum, building that confidence so that they can feel good.
Yeah. And not get themselves over their heads. I mean, that was another key thing I think that Ray and Tom were so good at, was they could help get people started wherever they were at. And if you were a world-class reining horse champion of some kind, they could still give you some some things to work toward, and some things that maybe you'd never thought of. But they could do the same with a little 12-year-old kid that was just learning to ride, or 5-year-old kid. And it was the ability to figure it out for yourself that they were after, and that starting that spark, that lighting that fire that would make them want to go on and learn it, but at their own pace, and enjoy figuring it out for themselves, where they didn't just bounce from clinician to clinician trying to see who could teach them the fastest. And that was another thing that I think Ray used to get frustrated with, is that people would come to the clinics and want to learn how to do flying lead changes when they couldn't even stop their horse yet.
Yeah.
So he would, in his horsemanship classes, it would slow it down, to where, can you pick up his left front foot or whatever? And some little kid in the class maybe could, but the seasoned cowboys and reining horse guys, what feet?
Yeah.
So that was the magic. And thank goodness I saw Ray first, because if I'd have seen Tom Dorrance first, I'd have probably just said, this is magic and I can't do it, because Tom was so subtle, and the things that he did were so, you sort of had to have some background, to me, with Ray in order to really appreciate Tom. Otherwise it was, and that's where I think all this horse whispering crap, I call it, came from, is they weren't whispering. They just knew what they were doing at a very high level. And it was so subtle that the rest of us couldn't see it. And a lot of times they couldn't explain what it was they were doing, because how do you explain how to write to somebody else if you're a writer?
Yeah.
I don't even know how I do it. I just pick up a pen and write.
Yeah. Yeah. So tell me a little bit about what it was like. The world in which you were writing these articles is so different from the world now, right? There was so many more magazines. There was so much more readership of magazines before the internet. Tell me about the importance of magazines in the time that these articles first appeared.
Well, I probably am going to sound like an old lady, but to me, the advantage, books just tell you stories, and videos just show you pictures, and magazines did the best job of blending the two, because it could stop action, and you could actually see something in the middle of what you were trying to explain. And so I felt like I think it's a big loss that people don't read magazines anymore. And to look on the internet and try to learn something, it's the step-by-step kind of learning. And it's not really teaching you to think on your own and to figure anything out or to take any chances. Tom was constantly experimenting with how to build something, or, how to make an automatic gate, or all kinds of stuff, because he had this confidence that he could think. And I think we're losing that with our younger kids, that they don't have that. And it's not, maybe confidence isn't the right word, but that's as close as I can get, because and I don't mean overconfidence. I mean the soft field confidence, where you don't just jump off into the ocean and think, okay, I'm going to learn to swim today. Not that kind of confidence, you kind of start at the kiddie pool and work your way up.
Yeah. Well,
So,
I was thinking, like, in thinking about visiting with you about this, like, it made me think back to the time, before the internet, and like sitting at the kitchen table with a cup of coffee and no distractions, and reading a magazine and looking at the pictures and studying it and taking that time. I mean, because you and I visited about your books, and that it is different. And so, like, I'm just trying to, like, as you were writing the articles for that audience, but you were mostly writing it for yourself. I don't know if you were thinking about the audience as much as just trying to understand it for you. Like, the attention that was given to it is so different than the attention that we give things now, I feel like.
yeah. And I love conversations, and at the time that I was writing those, I was living on the 06 ranch, and I was around cowboys and horses, 24/7. And so a lot of what I tried to write was gently trying to sort of help them understand what Ray was trying to do better. Because, one of the things that we used to joke about is that our horses probably thought, uh-oh, you've been to another damn Ray Hunt clinic. And because, you'd come home and try all the stuff that you thought you learned when that really wasn't what you were supposed to be learning. You were supposed to come home and see what your horse thought about all this stuff at one little inch at a time. And if you're in a conversation with somebody, they're not usually really listening or studying what you're saying. They're usually trying to think of what they're going to say back. So, which is part of what makes it fun to have you interview me, because you don't seem to do that. You do listen. And but usually people already have an agenda when they interview somebody. They think they've got it all figured out. They want to trap them or trick them into saying what they want them to say, and blah, blah, blah. And especially today's journalists, they're all looking for a gotcha moment or something. Where to me, journalism should be, ideally, is a way to have an extended conversation with somebody where here's what I think, and this is all I think about this one, so that the attention span isn't as long as what you need for a book, but it's longer than a sound bite, and it's more intense than a just pictures, than a video or something. So I really think magazines, more people I think we should go back to a lot of magazine reading, especially for the horse world. But maybe that's just my own personal bias. I just think, because I've done all of it, I've participated in all of it. And I think that those articles were more successful on helping people to not decide I had given them any answers, but to decide, okay, maybe I can go home and try some, or I can go outside and try some of this. but there was no how to in the article, or I tried my best not to have that in there. It was just see if you can pick up a horse's foot. And so they'd go out and see if they could pick up their horse's foot. And the reason I keep using that as an example is that I think that took me somewhere like 6 months until I could actually do that. And it was in one of those articles, I gave away how it happened to me. I was frustrated and I had just given up, and I was sitting out on the edge of a water trough in a corral watching a gray horse that I was riding at the time. And I noticed a fly light on his butt, and his skin trembled right there at that spot. And I thought, if he can feel that fly, he can feel anything I'm doing. And for some reason, he was kind of sleepy, and so he was standing hip shot. And so I just got curious about which of his feet moved first. And I figured out that, well, I won't tell it so that it, but if you'll go out the corral and watch your horse shift his weight around, you can figure out which foot he's going to start with. And it was like, okay, I got, one word of horse language. Now there's a whole set of encyclopedias that I have to figure out. But I got one word, so that's a start.
Yeah. Well, and then that built your confidence that you could get the next, like we got to have those successes to keep moving. Well, and as you're talking, I'm thinking, like riding in those, like you said, the clinic itself, like, I'm thinking about watching Ray's horsemanship clinic, and from an observer, you'd go, this is painfully simple, right? They're stop for the, but then when you're riding, I never rode with Ray, but like Tom Curtin's horsemanship classes are very similar. And it's almost like sort of it's like a guided meditation. You're sort of in the moment with your horse and trying to like really feel. And I think like that's what the articles do such a good job. It's sort of that you're sort of like taking my hand and saying, okay, I'm going to walk you through this in a way that you can analyze after, like not on your horse, and think about it off your horse. And then the next time you go to your horse, you've got just a little more understanding than maybe you had in the moment of what you were doing.
Yeah. One of the kids in that kids clinic article, I thought said it better than anybody else. He said that he liked to go to one and watch, and then go to one and ride in the clinic, and then go back and watch again, because it seemed like, if you're up there on the horse, you can't quite see what's going on and what people are getting by what they're doing. But when you watch and you're able to watch, 20 different riders and 20 different horses at a time, and then you can go try some of those things and see what works, and then go ride in a clinic and see if you can do a few more things that you couldn't do at the first one. And not that necessarily Ray was ever trying to get people to be able to perform in his clinics, because what he would always recommend is that you bring a horse you're having trouble with, and then he can maybe try to help with whatever's sticking on your communication issue. But some people would take a horse that they were getting along with great, that they thought was well trained, that would make them look good, when that wasn't, that really wasn't the purpose of why you were there.
Yeah. Well, and that makes me thinking about what the kid in the article said, like just how much, and thinking about learning, like how much I got out of, or how much I get out of going to clinics and auditing, because you're also developing like your ability to see what's going on and be able to analyze in the moment, like what's working for them, what's not working for them. Not in a, I mean, and I think that's what's different about when you go to a clinic, like we're sort of all in it together, right? We're all sort of there trying to understand and grow and learn. When you're just watching somebody on the computer, like you're maybe not, you don't have that same feeling about them maybe, but where you might be more critical, like, oh, but if you're there at a clinic, you're analyzing, like, is what they're learning working for them? Oh, I wish they'd get that little part. Like, I don't know. It's a different feeling.
Yeah. And it also at a clinic, it helps to talk to each other. You know, it helped kind of to talk to the other riders. I remember one time Jerry Pardue, at a clinic, he had brought a horse that he was having problems with. He said the shoulder was sticking out or something like that whenever he was trying to turn. And I mean, I had no idea how you even saw whether a shoulder was sticking out at the time. Probably still don't. And so as Ray worked with him a little bit, everything got worse and worse, and it looked like that horse was fixing to buck him off. You know, it was upset. He was upset. Ray was frustrated. And after that day, I thought, well, you know, Jerry's really a good horseman. I'm sure that was so embarrassing for him. And so I made an appointment to go speak to him, you know, and say, you know, I thought that was kind of hard on you because you're so good. You know, you were obviously the best rider out there. And he said, oh no, I just loved it. He said, that was a problem I've been having on the last 6 horses. And he said, I was just not able to get to a clinic where I could get some help. And he said, now I think I understand what I need to do. And, you know, where I was thinking he was embarrassed, he was thrilled.
Yeah. Yeah.
No, he wasn't embarrassed at all. And so it sort of helps you to get over, you know, because I think I was probably projecting the way I would have felt if it would have been me. And I would have been, you know, in tears if Ray would have picked on me that hard, you know, in front of everybody. So it kind of changes your attitude on some of your resistant spots, or it makes you think about, well, why did I assume he was going to be embarrassed, you know?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So it's always and letters. I miss people writing letters to each other.
Yeah.
Because that's another thing that I think the magazine articles are important because it's kind of a one-way conversation for somebody not to be thinking about how they're going to respond. And then with letters, it's the same thing, only then you do respond. And so I think you get more, like people have said more to me in letters than they would ever say to me face to face or in front of anybody else, or, you know, because if you're sitting out on the porch after you're finished working and having a cup of coffee or glass of tea or something and writing a letter to somebody, you're just kind of mellowed out and you just say things that you wouldn't normally say. So I think people should also read more magazines and write more letters. That's my advice to the world.
I like it. I mean, yeah. Okay, we'll work on folks to do that. Which makes me think about my letter writing. Yeah, I used to write letters all the time. I don't anymore. So I have to start with myself. Tell me a little bit about the experience of writing the articles. I mean, I know, well, from my experience, like one of the things that I loved writing about Ray was that he maybe didn't want you to write about him. So like there's a part about like the people that are seeking to have the spotlight or to have you share about them, or those are never the people that I was really interested in writing about myself. So tell me a little bit about your experience at this point writing about Ray.
Yeah, I felt like Ray didn't want publicity for himself, but I knew that he had a gift that so many of us, all, us, when I say us, I mean those of us actually working in that world, in the cowboy world, I mean, it's a dangerous job. People were bucking off and getting hurt and couldn't do that anymore. I mean, it was serious. It's a different world today because you don't see that so much. But back in my day, the horses used to buck. And so I could tell that people needed it, whether he, and I think he sensed that in the way I would write about him, is that I wasn't trying to give him publicity necessarily. I was trying to get people to just go watch, just go one time, just go see, just go prove me wrong, just go prove Ray wrong. And Ray would welcome, anybody that wanted to prove him wrong. And he was constantly telling us, well, this is how I do it, but you can do it however you want to. And so I don't think he wanted just publicity, but I think he wanted the kind of publicity that I was trying to give him. And I don't know how successful I was. I made a lot of mistakes looking back, and I'm sure that he would read one of the articles and slap his head, but he never once made a suggestion. He never once criticized it. And he encouraged me, to keep writing. And he, not necessarily about him. And I think he liked it better whenever I would talk about my own feelings, which, felt a little bit navel gazing or something. But I think if I was able to be honest about what I was going through to try to learn, and then he was kind of the shadow, the mouse on my shoulder, the little devil on one side and the angel on the other side, whatever. That that was what he wanted people to get out of it, is that this is not easy. It's a struggle, but the struggle is worth it, and so I would, if I was really totally being honest, which is hard to do, when you know that people out there are reading it, people that know you are reading it, and you're saying, a little kid in class could pick up their horse's foot, but I couldn't, it's kind of embarrassing. But Jerry Pardue helped with that, so I tried to not be so protective of my reputation or my ego or whatever makes us do some of the things that we do. And so I think Ray sensed that if I wasn't getting it right, at least I was working at trying to get it right. And so like the article about loading the horse, where it was focused on the girl that was loading that horse, instead of Ray loading it, so he liked things like that, I think, better. He didn't want to be put on his pedestal, and he didn't want to be a star. He wanted to say, this is how you learn. And this is what you can do to help yourself learn.
Mm-hmm.
And if you ever start learning and you can feel that and you know that you're learning, there's just no other drug that can compare. Even, a glass of wine at the end of the day does not compare.
Well, I mean, and that makes me think about, when he would talk about wanting to like come upon a kid riding their horse and just getting along with it. And when you asked where they learned that, they just said, is there any other way? Like his vision wasn't, I want everybody to ride like me. He just wanted that to be the natural state of things. That's what I took from that.
Yes, exactly. And I think to some degree, at least for me, being an old lady and seeing the world that I saw, back in the 60s and 70s, and how people were riding and how I was riding then, and what I see now, just going to a kid's play date, they're getting along with their horses so much better. And I know they didn't go to a ray hunt clinic because they're too young.
Yeah.
So it did happen. And I think if anybody's could actually be credited with changing the world, it was Ray and Tom. They really did. And I think because I applied it to teaching, I think that a lot of people that went applied it to whatever they were doing, their businesses. I mean, I can sense it when I read something about some, business person or whatever. I can tell that they saw the light.
Yeah. Well, that's interesting. That's
one again, cool. Ray Hunt.
Yeah. It's cool to
Even
think
if
about.
They never met him,
Yeah.
It did sort of get to be in the air.
Yeah, that's cool to think about it, radiating out into all different places.
Yeah, I can't remember when I've seen a tie down, for instance.
Mm-hmm.
And it used to be that almost every horse had a tie down.
Yeah. I thought about that. I went last summer and judged at a equine trail sports event. And there was it was so fun because people were really making really good decisions for their horses. And it was like, how fun is this to watch all these people, all different disciplines, all different kinds of horses, obviously from, didn't necessarily have the same background, but they were saying, okay, I'm going to make a choice here that puts my horse first and not throw him under the bus to win this, event. And it was just that was so inspiring to see. And
I think it spilled over into how people treated their spouses and their kids and their dogs and everything. I actually, at one clinic in California, I can't remember where it was, but there was a little girl that had a show pig in a pen. And Ray was talking to some people and he was watching that little girl go in the pen to feed that pig. And he could tell that pig was not respecting her. And so he walked over there and he said, "Can I feed your pig?" And the little girl said, "Sure." And so he went in and taught that pig a couple of manners, just very subtly, not any big deal or anything. And everybody was shocked watching him, feed a pig. What's the big deal about that? But he was really helping her because I was raised on a farm, and an old farmer's greatest fear is to fall in the pig pen. Mm-hmm. Hogs can really be mean, and they'll eat anything, including that old farmer. So that was a neat thing that stuck in my mind that Ray applied it to. I mean, it was life to him. It was just the way you live your life.
Yeah. I want to circle back to what you said a little bit ago about the difference in the people coming to the clinics being working cowboys and learning this being like a matter of being able to stay safe so that they could, not get hurt and be able to work. Like, I hadn't thought about that in a long, like, can you talk a little bit more about that when horsemanship and getting along with your horse isn't just a matter of not being able to do the recreation that you enjoy, but it's a matter of your livelihood? How does that change things?
Yeah, I saw, people get crippled, and good horses get crippled, and we called them wrecks, and we just assumed it was part of the life. And here in West Texas, we don't have deep dirt like you do in an arena. We have rocks. And so when you buck off, it's serious. Or if your horse falls or you have a runaway or whatever goes wrong. And so, people were either having a bad experience and they would give up the life, or they would, like almost any old cowboy, like we had a guy here named Apache Adams that was famous for being a horse trader that would, buy the horses that nobody else could ride. And then he would get them to where they were good enough that he could sell them. And somebody asked him one time, because I think at the time he was nursing a broken rib or something. And they asked him how many bones he had broken. He said he thought all of them. And that was true of a lot of people. I mean, our cook, Ramon Hartnett, that cooked for the 06, he said that he had broke horses when he was a young man. And he said, I can't quote it, but like he said, he broke his ribs seven times, and broke his leg, and broke one arm, or broke his collarbone, 2 or 3 times. And so he quit and started cooking. And so that was a common, problem. And that was why a lot of people ended up being spur makers or braiders or things like that, because they would get hurt, and if not hurt, maybe lose enough confidence that they would decide to do something else. And even though I had been to a lot of ray hunt clinics, as I got older and couldn't keep my balance quite as good, I could feel myself losing confidence. And so that's when I decided to go into teaching. I think I was 40 at the time. I was kind of old to start something new, but that happens even though you have help. And there's nothing more heartbreaking than to watch somebody who cares about that life more than anything. Like I've got several cowboy friends that are getting to that point in their life, or have gotten to it, and are no longer with us. And when they can't ride anymore, it's like their world ends. Yeah. And the thing that hurries that along a lot of times is to get hurt. And so Ray was a godsend. Wrecks still happen. You can never guarantee it. Anytime you get on a horse, you need to expect that something could happen, but it doesn't happen every morning.
Yeah. It ups your odds considerably.
Yeah.
Yeah. Tell me a little bit about how do you approach your photography? Because the photos are incredible, and I think that that's one of the most amazing parts of these historical articles, is getting to see the time. I mean, because you look at it and you can say, okay, I'm in that moment. Anyway, tell me a little bit about how you approach your photography, because the photography is an amazing component to these articles.
I guess a lot of that came from the fact that I lived that life, and I was around it so much, and by the time I started writing about Ray. I'd been writing about cowboys for a while and taking pictures. And I had them to help me because one of the things I used to do whenever the crew would be camped at my house at Willow Springs, I would set up my slide projector and do a little slideshow in the evening after supper to entertain everybody. And they would make comments and they would point things out. And so they helped me. Dang.
Tell me about the evening slideshows. That sounds so cool.
Oh, okay. So they would tell me, they would see the pictures, because I got to go places that they never got to see, and so they would say, oh, that's a really good picture of blah, 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 or, oh, I never knew you could do that. Or look at the way that horse's feet are positioned while that guy's doing whatever. And so they really helped me see what I had captured, because a lot of it was luck, and they helped me. And so then the next time I would pay more attention to some of those things, so they were kind of training me to be a better photographer, I guess. And for so much of the cowboy photography at the time, and still is, in my humble opinion, it concentrates on the exotic costumes, or, the extra long mustaches, or the handsomeness, or the everything but what they're actually doing. Mm-hmm. Where what impressed my audience was what they could learn from looking at those pictures, what they could see. And so that was what I aimed for. I didn't look for the beauty, although I still tried to make them beautiful, at least sometimes. But I tried to capture what I thought those guys would like to see in those slideshows. Mm-hmm. And so if I noticed something, like I went to Paraguay and to visit some friends that ranched down there, and I knew that the cowboys, when I got home, were going to want to see the saddles and the bridles and the corrals, and the way they did things, the way they worked. And so I took pictures of all that kind of stuff for them. And and then those are the ones that are the best ones. And they did the same with the Ray Hunt stuff. They would study them and they would say, this is really interesting, and blah, blah, blah. And so whenever I was at the next clinic, I would kind of look for some of those kind of things to photograph. Yeah. So I kind of really owe a lot to my audience that was kind of in the background with me.
Yeah. Yeah. That's, because you said that the stories, so the stories and the photos were for, you had the crew, the 06 crew in the back of your mind when you're working on these.
Yeah. And not just them, but a lot of different people that were friends all over the country, and other ranches that I'd gone to. And, I could, as I traveled and, went around and went to Ray Hunt clinics and went to another ranch and blah, 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 I could see where maybe there was people that were having problems with something. So I would try to photograph that and pay attention to it at the next clinic and see if I could write about it. Mm-hmm. And if not, explain it, which again, I tried not to step in the middle there, but I would try to convince them that if they would go see Ray, they could figure this out.
Yeah. Okay, well, I feel like I could ask you questions all day. Let's visit a little bit. We sort of touched on this earlier, but I want to ask it again. Is I mean, these articles they're 30 more than 30 years old, and they still have a lot to share with a modern audience. Not only do they have historical value, but they are still teaching and sharing. Like, why do you think there's this lasting appeal? Like, why do you think that it's still true today as it was when you wrote the articles?
Well, because I'm a old college professor and not only writing but literature, um, Shakespeare's just as true today as he ever was.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel the same way towards Ray and Tom. Whenever you get down to the bedrock, it's bedrock and it's going to last. It's not going to blow away in the wind or wash away in the rain. It's going to stay there. And so I feel like what they were trying to figure out and what they were trying to help people understand was a lot like the best literature, that it lasts because people don't change and horses don't change, but we keep cycling through this stuff. Like whenever I was working on my PhD on Shakespeare or my master's degree on Shakespeare, I read all of the horsemanship books that were published during his day, because amazingly, one of the first books that ever got printed when they first invented the printing presses were horsemanship books, because at the time everybody had to, anywhere they went, that was the transportation. And if you were fighting a war, you did it on horseback, and everything was done horseback. And you would think that those people would know something about horses, but they were really cruel and didn't. And so Shakespeare and somebody that I think either influenced him or vice versa, Gervase Markham, which I highly recommend anybody find his old books and read them, seemed to have that. So we had what Ray and Tom were trying to get across way back then, and probably earlier, but back then. But then we forget. We think, oh well, let's make that easier, or let's look for a easier way to do that, or let's do it on a computer, or let's have AI, or whatever the latest thing is, do that. Well, eventually all of that stuff gets the world all messed up again, and so you kind of have to go back to the basics. And so that, to me, that's the reason we read literature. That's the reason we read history, anything, so that we can go back and have a little bit of a refresher every once in a while and think about some of those things again that helped before, and maybe they can help again. Instead we just seem to look for what's wrong. And that's another thing about riding your horse. You want to look for what's working, not necessarily what's wrong. Because if you're always concentrating on what's wrong, your poor horse is going to think, crap, I can't satisfy this guy. And so I believe in this universal thread of humanity, I guess it is, that runs through everything, and we just need to get refreshed on it every once in a while.
Oh my gosh, I think we have to stop there, Barney. Like that, you gave me that was a big chunk to think about. That's yeah, that's amazing. Yeah, the universal thread. Okay, my brain's full now.
Mine's empty. It probably was when we started.
Well, thank you so much for visiting today, and I'm going to torture you some more. But I think I got to go chew on that for a little bit.
Okay.
Okay. All right. Thank you, Barney. Good to talk to you. I'm going to stop.